Should I start right now? Okay. Thank you very much for being here in the siesta time, which is time of the day that Spanish people love the most. I'm going to talk about 10 things or more that I have learned where I was working in the Perl 6 documentation. I'm not JJ Merelo in GitHub, I'm JJ in GitHub. I'm Merelo, and I am the Perl 6 Dodger. This is a word I just made up. So I could as well make up the pronunciation. I like Dodger. It's like, sounds like European or Italian or something like that. What do I mean by this? I don't mean, of course, I have been working on the documentation for, I would say, like 6 months now. This is actually the number, you can see the thing here. Anyway, this is the number of lines actually in the current code base of Perl 6 documentation. There are around 80,000 lines, right? So most of them have been written. This one here is Moritz. He was the one who created the documentation repository and was working there for a long time. This one here is someone called Sipan. I don't know who's that. And this guy over here, that's me. So right now, if you look at the lines that are right now in the Perl 6 documentation and other programs and everything, I've written around 1/10 of the lines that are there. So it's relatively likely that if you have seen something there in the documentation, there is at least a little part of it that's written by me. Also, if you look at the number of issues that have been closed, you are, that was me over here. There were around 2,500 issues in the repository. Right now there are open around 176 after I closed the one that Joel did this morning, so I think it was 175. I have closed around 450 issues, all the issues that were there, so that makes around 1/5 of the issues that are closed right now were closed by me, and in the last 6 months. So that's what I mean by Dodger. So Dodger is not the same as douchebag, but respect. I could make my thing. Anyway, my point with this talk is that we really need help with Perl 6 in general and the documentation in particular. And I expect that you can also learn all this kind of thing working in the documentation of Perl 6. Some of you already have, but I expect to gather more people for doing this kind of thing. This course was sponsored by the Perl Foundation, so thank you very much. I requested a grant from the Perl Foundation, and I got it last February. Started the work at the beginning of April. I finished pretty much by the end of May. That doesn't mean that I haven't been working before on the documentation or that I stopped working after that, so I'm still working on that. But anyway, the Perl Foundation was very, very gentle in giving that to me. I had never done this kind of, I've been in academia my whole life. You know what academia means, right? So it's publish or perish. So you write the stuff, but unless you're afraid that your students are going to see it, you don't really make any effort to make some quality thing. For me, it was a very interesting experience. I hope to transmit it during this talk. This is also the number of commits in the Perl 6 documentation repository a long time, right? So check out Moritz era. So up to here it was Moritz, and then Moritz, and then Moritz. He was there all the time. This was a Christmas release. So there were around 300 commits in a single month. This is per month, right? Also, I have more information here. The size of the ball is related to the number of authors. And there is something called entropy, which is very interesting. I'm not going to get into maybe we'll talk about entropy in some later talk. Point is, entropy is related to how the work is spread among the different collaborators, right? High entropy means that there is a certain distribution or certain amount of information the number of collaborators. Low entropy means that there is maybe one person or there are several persons, they work exactly the same. That almost never happens. But anyway, this was interesting for me for a couple of things. The first thing is Christmas release. Then July 2017, something happened. I have no idea what happened. It was, all of a sudden, lots of people started to work on that. But then I started to work on the grant here and here and here. And this has been July 2018. You see, the month with the second highest number of commits in the repository. So it's working relatively well. So I hope that the effort that people are putting onto the repository is kind of sustainable, and that was also one of the things I wanted to do with this grant. Not only to work a lot on that, but also to analyze how were the dynamics of collaboration within that. Also, you can see the color, the size of over here is around. It's related to the number of people who have been working on a particular month. The month with the highest number of collaborators was, I think, here, was around 41 or 42. July was the second highest. In fact, it was tied for the first position with 41 people, 41 contributors to the code base. You have some rhymes here. They're probably related to hackathons and everything, but anyway, it's interesting to see this kind of thing because what we intend to do is this kind of thing, which is a more volunteer work, is to make it sustainable through time, so that all of a sudden, the main contributor goes away because gets a job or children or life or whatever, and then it stops working. But everybody knows what's Perl 6 here? Everybody's familiar? No idea. I have no idea either. So you're familiar with with all these things, right? So you know this already, right? You know that there is also something called roast. So the roast part is it's like this, but with turtles. So it's turtles all the way down, and then it's roast, and then it's kind of complicated. But I would say that if you want to really look at Perl 6, the main thing are Rakudo, which is the compiler, and roast. You probably don't have to go farther away than that. Probably. You might. And then, I'm talking about documentation. I see that there's a lot of people here. I like that. But how many of you would like to work on stuff like new language? Raise of hands, show of hands. And then you say, games. Hey, games, we like games, And then, documenting a new language? Yeah, it's wonderful. I'm going to get a job in documenting a completely new language. And where's the documentation for that? No, there's no documentation. You are the documentation. Right. So that's the thing. The first thing is that we are documenting a language into existence. It's like in the Genesis. In the Genesis, there was Adam and Eve, and they were there on the paradise. And then they say, okay, so what are all these things over here? These things move, and they are green, the other grow, whatever. You have to give them a name to them. So, Adam and Eve, Adam gave name to the animals, and so on so forth. And then they were finished giving name to every animal over there. They say, okay, what do we do? And they had no manual for that, so they actually have to make up all the reference manual for the world and all the thing. But in language, it's a little bit like that. A language is a wonderful thing, and there's a lot of work into that. But until you say you can do this with this, it doesn't really. You can't really say that it exists until you know what can you do with it, how you do it, best practices and everything. It's very difficult to work. So when you are writing the documentation, you are documenting a language into existence, and that's a really wonderful thing. And documentation is really, really important. This is documentation for something that's in my kitchen, but since I'm absolutely useless for this kind of thing. So, but there is something here that says reset. So whenever it doesn't work, I go there, I reset it, and it sometimes works. But the documentation is very important. So it's one of the most important. If you don't have documentation, it's like you have a toy for the creator of something. It's you can do stuff with it, but then if someone else wants to do something with it, yeah, it's kind of hell. And it's really, really important. There are some things missing from. Mr. Comatic said, writing good documentation is difficult, and keeping it current is time-consuming, but it helps get and keep users, even if library support, performance, platform support, and community size all need improvement. So documentation is really one of the bases of a community, of a language, of a library, of everything. And it's a very difficult thing. So probably you have realized, I see several of you who are working on the documentation. Probably you have realized that it's a really, really complicated thing. It's a customer-facing thing, and your customers are programmers, and programmers are difficult. So it's a kind of difficult thing to do. And then Vicky Brasser, who's also in our community, is releasing a well-documented open source project is like saying, who wants cookies at the acre? Gets attention and makes you the most popular person in an otherwise crowded room. But of course, you never release something undocumented at the same time, because you would never release it, right? So it's something like, okay, it's out there, you release it, and then, okay, we make up some time to kind of do it. But what about the community? We did a survey, the new survey. By the way, we are going to do another survey a short time from now, the OS survey. Please answer to the survey, because it really helps us to know what's going on in the Perl 6 community. Anyway, I was going to say something about this. This is a very nice kind of thing that we people in academia like. So it's about the average score that people give to the documentation. The average score is 7-ish. This is the median here, but you see that it goes down all the way down to 4 and 3 and 2. So that there are some people there, out of the 220 people who responded to the survey, there are some people there that are giving a very, very low score to the documentation. I think that's bad, because once again, we need this. Even if everything else, even if performance fails, even if everything else fails, the documentation is something that supports a whole project. So we really should try and do something better. So, I mean, that's one with the lesson I learned. The documentation is very important. And then I started to think about dinosaurs. I asked my doctors to draw dinosaurs. One of them draw this one, the other draw this one. One of them is left-handed, so this is Selena, it's left-handed. But you see, pretty much the mouth is very similar. The little hands are like pretty much the same. I say, okay, so why are they drawing exactly, I mean, very similar dinosaurs? And then I thought about this one. This is my dinosaur. So, you know, when children are very young, they ask, Daddy, Daddy, draw me a dinosaur, because you know, that's a nice thing to draw. Then you draw a dinosaur and you draw it like this, with the little hands and with the tail. You see, they are very similar. When you're writing documentation, you are drawing dinosaurs. You are drawing dinosaurs for lots of people who want to learn to do some stuff. And then I say, okay, so I'm going to put lots of dinosaurs, whether I want or not, in the documentation. And there are already many dinosaurs there, but I mean, I have to put my own. So I could say, okay, I can as well have my own dinosaurs and put them with some intention. But 10 years from now, I'm going to look into all the things that have been produced in the Perl 6 community. I'm going to look for some patterns that I intentionally put into documentation. They're not bad patterns, in no way, but you know, this is a big responsibility after all, because people are going to work that way for a long time, right? Second thing I learned, or this is actually the third thing. Who's counting? What? Yeah, okay. We always start at 0. I really learned Perl 6. Before I started into this, I have, written a book, and it's, by the way, it's right there. You can buy it. I will autograph it for you. But I had no idea about Perl 6. Really no idea. I still have no idea. But I have learned Perl 6. I can't say I know a lot, but I know, some things. It's like using a pet project to learn a language. You are using the language itself to learn the language. And the thing is that people can probably think that people say, okay, I don't know Perl 6, so why should I write the documentation about Perl 6? It's because the documentation is not written by those who know. It's written by those who can, right? If only the people who knows the language is going to write the documentation, it's never going to be written, because those people have lots of work to do. But anybody who can help, just a little bit, just a little tiny bit, writing something, copy editing something, I mean, you really should. Because the people who can write the documentation, they want, that's it. That means that we are going to be wrong lots of times. I've been wrong, infinite amount of times. But still, I do what I can, right? For instance, this is something I didn't know. I wasn't documented before. This hour thing, right? It's declaring a variable with this kind of scope within a token, within a grammar. I put this sample, I answered to some issue that was there. I put that sample. I had no idea this could be done before. And nobody really did, because it wasn't in the documentation. So there was some issue saying we should document this. And I did that. So that's something I learned. And I learned it for good. So it's something that I know how to do now. Here's my dinosaur. If you see anything with Thor in it, you can be sure that I wrote that code. I always use Thor and Odin and Freya and that kind of thing. But you see some kind of this stuff. This is kind of my dinosaur, right? Actually, Thor is a letter that is in current Icelandic, so they actually use it. This is a car. They use it in various debates, such as this one. It's a name. But there were at least half of the players in the World Cup and play for Iceland were called Thor, and you know it's something that I was saying I was learning Perl 6, but I also learned every other single language in the world, because documentation is not only documentation; it's also some tooling around the documentation, and documentation has got all kind of things, right? It's got Perl 6, it's got CoffeeScript, it's got Perl, it's got Pod 6. And knock. There was an issue that was kind of like 1 year old. There was this issue. This wasn't working. This is something that's within the test we do for documentation, because every time something is documented, we run some test on it. And there was something not working when you were introducing some word that has some Unicode character in it. There was something wrong going on, and it was split. Some weird stuff. So I had to write this little, not to write, I had to modify, had to look up awk, had to modify that line, and it started to work. It was there probably since 2016. But anyway, there are other languages. I had to work, for instance, with Ruby, because there was an issue that said we should have this kind of thing in GitHub. You know, highlighting in GitHub or Pod 6 in GitHub. GitHub is mostly written in Ruby, so I had to go and write Ruby, which I don't really like, but you have to do it. So, I mean, you have to do all kind of things, and sometimes you have to write some examples. I wrote examples in Elixir and some other languages. I tried Elm. Don't do that. Elm is terrible. I couldn't really compile anything with Elm. But anyway, fourth thing, there are infrequently asked questions. This is the number of questions with the tag Perl 6 in the Stack Overflow. You see that it's roughly going up, kind of. But anyway, it's got like a binary frequency of questions. That means that one day has one question, next day 0 questions, then 0 questions, and so on and so forth. It was going up just a little tiny bit in these last months, but it's going down. So I think there was a question yesterday. There were like 2 or 3 questions the other day. I mean, just think about it. It's got as many questions in 1 month as Angular has in 10 minutes. So it's, I mean, we should really go to that. So please, go and ask in Stack Overflow. I'm looking at you, right? Go and ask there. Even if people in the IRC channel, even if people in Perl 6 user are incredibly helpful, go, once your question has been answered there, go to Stack Overflow and answer, ask it all over again. Go there, check if there's something that you can help anyone. And also answer, there's an S missing there, and upvote. Upvote questions about people really, if they are being introduced into a new language, they really have to feel welcome. Ruth Holloway was talking this morning about that kind of thing. If they go to Stack Overflow and you tell them, go and read the documentation, I mean, it's not really helpful. Even if it's the simplest question in the world, book it up and answer it, if possible. And even if someone is very wrong, which happens to me all the time. Then you remember about laziness and impatience and hubris. When I was working on this, I tried to be the opposite. So I tried to be not lazy, I tried to be not impatient, and I tried to be not hubristic. Yeah. Because not lazy is kind of figure. So one thing I had to document was laziness and eagerness. So it's something that's not in Perl, that's in Perl 6. So you have to document all this kind of thing. So you know, these lazy sequences and everything. This was actually an example that was LTA, less than optimal. So I had to rewrite it. So I did that. And well, you see this. There was an issue, and then 45 minutes later, the issue was closed. Was something I did. So that happens sometimes, not always, but it happens sometimes because I'm checking issues all the time. So this is kind of eager, I would say. But of course, there are other issues that have been there for like 2 years, and they are very difficult. They are very hairy. I mean, you really have to devote a lot of time to that. So, not laziness equal to diligence, and that's one of the things that and well, hubris. I would say that hubris is approximately equal to 0. So, actually, you're writing something into existence. So, you're kind of hubristic. Anyway, you can't help it. And if I look at this kind of things, so the kind of things that have been changing and files and everything, I created 30 files. Probably by now there are more files that were created by me from scratch. The first one that created the most files was Will Coleda. He created most of them. I'm not sure if he actually created them. I think he renamed them. So maybe there were some files that weren't created. But anyway, so I'm creating stuff some there. And can you imagine? I mean, 30 files is quite a good amount of files. So it's something that I mean you have to do. And for instance, I created this one. I'm really proud of this page. I created mathematics with Perl 6 because what I tried to do was looking at the Wikipedia and trying to write some logic things, some algebra and something using almost exactly the same notation as in the Wikipedia. I pretty much managed it using this thing like the good thing here is that I'm using this dash, top dash, I don't know how you call that, but I'm using that for this kind of notation. So you see that you can write mathematics with Perl 6 almost in the same way, I mean in the most natural notation, which is really nice. And then you have to flow with the documentation. I learned this kind of flow, this kind of things you gotta do to document something. First thing is it documentable? So is there, should I work into this? Because that's the thing with the language. What is Perl 6 really? Is it Rakudo? Is it roast? Is it the synopsis? So the first thing you have to find out is if you actually have to document it, because you don't know if it's some Rakudo specific thing. You don't know if it's maybe not implemented yet. There are some things that you have to do. So you have to look at the synopsis. That's always the reference. So it's a valuable thing. Although in some cases it's a little bit ambiguous, so you don't really know what's going to happen. Then you have to look at roast. If it's in roast, it's documentable. So it's part of the language. It should be there. Also, roast is very nice because you actually you have some example of what the thing does. So you can actually kind of work through that example, maybe put it directly, which I have done several times. And then you have to look at Rakudo, because there are some things in Rakudo that are not in roast. So yeah, I mean, Rakudo is an implementation of Perl 6. So there are some things in the implementation that are not in roast. But there's not a clear difference. Sometimes there are things in Rakudo that are not in roast, but they should be in roast. So in one particular occasion, what I have done is I have created the test in roast for something that should be in roast, right? So, I mean, this kind of thing is kind of relatively easy, right? And then you have to document it. So okay, I can document. So this is something that belongs to the language or belongs to Rakudo. So you have to say some provision of this is only Rakudo, but then you have to document it. So what do? You can go on GitHub. Maybe someone has already used it, even if it's not documented. That never happens. But then you have to go to Rakudo, which is the implementation. You have to look their implementation, which is, I mean, one of the good things about Perl 6 is that most of it is implemented in Perl 6. So if you know a little bit or a little bit more of Perl 6, you can look up the source and say, okay, this thing does this. Sometimes it's a little bit hairy because you have some things that are down to NQP, which is the thing, but NQP is more or less clear. It's a small language. And then you have to go to roast, because sometimes if it's implemented in Rakudo, it's not, I mean, you got like a big function that's calling some other function that's eventually calling something in NQP, so you know what's going there, so you have to go again to roast, because roast is a working example of the feature that you want to do. Anyway, we don't want it perfect, we want it there. You can maybe think that, okay, one thing we want to document are context. It wasn't documented so far, so we were taught that there was an issue. There was also like 2 years old. So we have to document all these context, like 20 contexts. I managed to document 3 of them. I created the page, and it's there. There are still many pages that are, I mean, many different contexts that are not documented. But at least we have something. We have some page that says, okay, there are this thing called context. The most important one, string context, void context, and all have been documented. And then the others, okay, I mean, it's there. Someone can improve it. For instance, this one. It's maybe not perfect. It's one of the last thing I wrote, I think, before this talk. I mean, you can look at it and say, maybe I don't like it, but I mean, it's there, right? So what this does is checking, I mean, it's using I'm breaking the room in so many different ways. Okay, it's there. Yeah. Anyway, documentation is like cooking. Why is it like cooking? It's approximately, why is it like cooking? The thing is that I stayed at home where I was working on the ground. Because I have my office at the University of Granada, and I have no classes on that semester, so I say, okay, I'm going to stay at home. As soon as I was at home, I say, okay, I'm going to cook. So anyway, this is better there, slightly charred and order pizza. It's one of the things you learn. It's better if you have some food on the table, even if it's a little bit charred, a little bit burned. I think that order pizza. So it's the same thing with documentation. This is a chili con carne. I did this chili con carne. My chili con carne is the most awesome Mediterranean, made in Granada, cooked by me chili con carne in the world. But I cook. Yeah. Yeah. But this is something. I mean, you also cooking is like programming. But at the same time, I was staying at home. Probably you have had that experience. I never had that experience before, staying at home, because I've been in academia all my life. So you really have to find something to get out there, go to the street, do some stuff, walk around, because if not, you're really isolated. So I did this. So I bought groceries I bought the stuff for doing the meal, fresh food every day. I cooked it when my wife and daughters arrived at home. They had their meal on the table. I was cooked. They mostly liked it all the time. I mean, it was there. So it's like documentation. It needn't be perfect. It needed to be there. Anyway, so I did lots of things. For instance, this is a risotto. I did lots of risottos. This is made of ham and rice. And then I had some examples using cooking in the documentation. This is, for instance, it's in the class tutorial. Actually, I was helped by some book called Cooking for Geeks, which I got as a prize in the London Perl workshop. So everything comes around in the Perl world. So I did this kind of thing. I mentioned the Cooking for Geeks and everything, but you got also some cooking in the documentation. Anyway. And this is also a thing that I discovered. We are in a very complex system. I have been working in something called artificial life. It's related to complex system. Complex systems are not complicated systems. Are systems in which the interaction sometimes creates some critical state. And in that critical state, something you do might have a high impact or might have no impact. We are really in a complex system. This, for instance, something called a Sankey diagram that shows who is opening issues and who is closing those issues, right? So it means that if you have something going from here to there, it means that whichever way you pronounce that, open this issue and I closed it, right? Or till open I closed it, Moritz, You kind of see what's going on here. For instance, you see that many issues were closed by Moritz. You also see these different layers, like there are some people that are first responders, so that they kind of close the issues that have been created by the people, and then those same persons create issues and they are closed by other people, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, and this is a very complex thing. If you look at it from the point of view of complex network, it's really a complex network. So you can measure the betweenness, you can measure all kind of things, and this is really complex. But that means also that some stupid thing you might do, like for instance, one thing I did was I created a label in the repository that said TPF grant, so that I kind of kept track of what I was working on. I eventually deleted it. Why? Because people saw the label and said, this is JJ's thing. I'm not going to work on that. So it was kind of that. So I had like lots of issues I had checked for for one reason or another, and I wanted to keep track of. And then you realize that people were not doing anything with those issues. So that's a very simple thing. So you really have to, every little thing you do, like reviewing and pull request, doing some commit, commenting on the commit, changing something on a test, is going to have a high impact because it's a all repositories are in a critical state. Anyway, and you also have these power laws, right? I don't remember exactly where it is, but you find power laws all over the place. I presented a paper on this like 2 years ago, and I keep doing that, this kind of repository mining. This is probably the number of contributions in order, so that means that the first one that's contributing the most, that suffix, has like, if I remember correctly, 1800. Then the second one, that's me, I have around 800, third one. So it goes, you put it on a logarithmic scale and it goes down. When you find this power law, the SIPS law, it means that it's a complex system. And if it's a complex system, you have to be careful how you work with it. And it's also complicated, but we have this DAC map, which was a really, really difficult thing to. I really couldn't figure out what's the difference between DAC map and deep map. This is the example that goes in DAC map. I challenge you to figure it out in some time, but anyway, if you can't, just look it up in the documentation. And then toes. When you're working anywhere in the Perl 6 or Perl 5, probably in a community, but this is the one I have the most experience with. It's like working on the beach. You're bound to step on one toe sooner or later, like this, right? There are so many toes that you're going to, and then there is this thing. JJ broke everything. So it's like, everything is broken, I did it. Well, sometimes it's true. But then the next day is, JJ fixed everything. Everything is broken. There was one, I remember I was coming back from Japan, I think, and everything was broken because we did, someone did this big change to keep all the documentation order, but then that change wasn't in the test that runs in Travis and shippable, and then all of a sudden nothing was working. So I had to, it wasn't that difficult if you know how to do that. But that's one of the things I did, precisely. I prepared the test. One of them is running a Docker container, the other one is running directly from a binary, and there is another one which is like kind of canary in a coal mine, which is very fast test. In 2 minutes, it tells you there's some error or whatever. So I did that, so I knew how to do it. But it's something that you can do. And finally, languages are people. I think it says it here, right? Perl is a people, so it happens the same. That's one of the most interesting things, or one of the things I like the most about this is that I really had occasion to meet lots of people who, they are great persons, they are great programmers. Sometimes those two qualities are not in the same, person. But the computers are easy, people are hard. The hardest thing wasn't writing this example for some feature that was very hairy, and you had to look up like 3 different Rakudo things. It wasn't the hardest thing. The hardest thing is when you do something with the best of your intention or your skills or whatever, somebody insults you personally, saying that you know nothing, and something like that happens. But if you're okay with that, eventually, as I said, it's the most difficult thing. So sometimes you do something with the best of your intentions, and people react in a completely unexpected way. So you really have to learn that when you're working in a big project, this applies to documentation, and I guess it pretty much applies to everything. You really have to be very careful with people. I really love the talk this morning with Ruth Holloway guy, because you really have to show love for everyone and kind of try, to make everybody feel welcome and so on. If you don't feel welcome, you can try and do something to fix that. But what I did was try to work harder, and that was it, right? And people have class. So I'm putting these small examples, like this kind of thing. So a class with person. This is also an example there. The thing is, programming is solving problems. Documentation is not exactly programming, but it is also programming. So we're programming to solve problems. What's the problem we have to do? we're trying, our problem, it's attract and keep a community. So in the documentation, the problem we are trying to solve is not to check all the things, not say, okay, this is documented, this is documented, this is documented. We have a sample for this, all the samples were, and that's it. No, no, no. The problem is that you have to attract and keep a community. People look at the documentation, they find it from Google or from Stack Overflow, whatever. They find the language and say, okay, this is nice. I like this. This is the problem we have to solve as a community, and I mean it's a very nice problem. It's also a very difficult problem. But I also realize that you make better code, and I think that you eventually become a better person, because one of the things I have learned is to deal with people. Because working on a project is probably 90% code and 10% is dealing with people, but the difficult part is really dealing with people. And by little learning to be more welcoming, more try to make people happy with what they are doing and so on. I wouldn't say, but okay, what I'm gonna say is I have tried to be a better person by doing this. My objectives with working with Perl 6 weren't only to learn some coding, but also to kind of do a personal development or whatever. So, big, huge thanks to everyone that has made me probably, maybe, a better person. From my heart. And thank you very much. That's it. Let's say over time? No, time. So we have time for questions, right?
You have 10 minutes for questions.
Okay.
I actually came into the IRC a couple of times with some issues, and you inspired it like the same as in your presentation, just ask the question on the Stack Overflow. But yeah. I was coming with a particular issue, like that there was an issue in the code which I fixed it up.
Okay.
In the CCP. My question is should we inspire the people to put the questions about real problems in the language? Probably it's not a good idea. I mean, I understand you to ask the question about the language, but if people discover the issue in the language, it's not a good idea to publicly say about this. So probably we should kind of make an initial stage of investigation what kind of question it is, and only after this inspire people to come to the Stack Overflow.
Okay, so he's asking whether if there are some issues with the language itself, like some bug or something like that, maybe we should go to some other venue like the IRC channel of the mailing list instead of going to Stack Overflow. My answer is you can do whatever you want. So that's the thing. So I'm not asking people to go first to Stack Overflow. Of course they might. But sometimes the good thing about the Stack Overflow is that everybody knows the Stack Overflow. Yeah. Everybody's there. So it's easier to search. If somebody, just imagine that it's a language issue. We are very transparent about issues. So you have issues in Rakudu, you have issues in RT, you have issues everywhere. So it's not like we are saying, no, I mean, Perl is imperfect, Perl 6 is imperfect.
Yeah, but you're also saying about attracting the people, and I don't think that, if you're publicly saying that we have this issue and nowadays the behavior changes and so on, it's not attractive. People are who, they don't know about the Perl 6, for example, they are looking at the article on the Stack Overflow and there is a discussion. I've seen a couple of these discussions. Okay. So, and people say, oh yeah, it was like this. No, it's nowadays changes to this. And I think it's not correct.
My experience there is I have some problem, there is a bug, I ask in Stack Overflow, then Liz goes to Stack Overflow, say this looks like a bug, then she goes to Rakudu, she fixes the bug, and she comes back. So, I mean, it's just...
we should just another question, answer this one, from this history.
You can always edit questions and answers, but if the thing is out there in Stack Overflow is going to be helpful with everyone. So if you fix the bug, for instance, you can always go back to the question in Stack Overflow and say, okay, this is fixed, and this is the behavior we want to have, and it's working now. But of course, I mean, languages have errors. That probably happens even in Perl, which is now in 5.28. Probably not as often, but putting bugs in the open can have somebody find that bug and maybe work on it. So I don't see any point in hiding that there are some bugs there. I mean, Perl 6 is a young language. It's a young language that has been 17 years in the making, or 16 years in the making, but it's still young. It's 2 years old. So there are some issues. So why not? We should hide it. I mean, that doesn't mean that you can't use it in production. You can use it in production in most cases, but still there are some things that have to be fixed, of course, and there will be. Thank you. Any other question? Yeah, please.
You did other part of TPF grant program. Can you share your experience, like pros and cons?
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I probably should have talked about that. So I requested the grant in February. I got the confirmation in late March, I think. I got assigned a manager for the grant. It was Mark Jensen. He was an excellent person. He went through all the things that I had to do. So when you got a grant, what you have to do is you have to submit first. Of course, you have to do what you were supposed to do. So I was saying I'm going to fix so many bugs in the Perl 6 documentation. So you have to do that. You have to present monthly reports, and then you have to present another report at the end of the grant. So that meant that I was presenting 2 reports, one in April, another one in May. Everything is published. You can check it out. All the charts and everything, they are published in the TPF grant repository, so you can check them. I have also published like 2 or 3 papers on the subject. And then eventually, when you publish the final report, it goes back to the Perl Foundation. The Perl Foundation votes on you having done what you were supposed to do or not, and then you get the money. So it's relatively straightforward. I really encourage you to, if you have some good idea of what to do with Perl 6 or Perl, I encourage you to really check out the process. You might get the grant, you might not get it. It depends also on a vote. But if you feel really passionate about doing something and you feel you can do it, I mean, by all means, request a grant from the Perl Foundation, because they are really. I mean, I don't think this would have happened without the Perl Foundation grant. I would still have been working. I'm still working in the documentation, but I couldn't like go home, stay there at home, devote 8 or 6 or 10 hours a day to working on this. I wouldn't have done it without the grant. And then I got the money in 1 month, 1.5, something like that. So pretty straightforward. From request at the beginning of January to getting the money back, it was 6 months maybe. And okay, 5 minutes to go. So is that answering your question? Or?
Yes, thank you for the hard work.
Thank you. Any other question?
I just have a suggestion.
Okay.
You're so good in data analysis and some like graphs.
Yeah.
Really representative. So probably as the next step after the documentation,
Sure.
it would be great if you can do some modules for data analysis, because it's kind of like machine learning data science is very hyped nowadays.
I have an evolutionary algorithm in Perl. I'm going to talk it about next Friday. But anyway, all this thing, all the analysis and everything is done in Perl. So what I do is I work with the API of GitHub, and I was using as a base some GitHub Web Services thing, but I had to modify it. Right now it's a set of scripts, so it's not really, it's kind of rigged together, but I will kind of put it together so that you can analyze pretty well repositories, because it's very interesting to look at the entropy. It's very interesting to look at all the things, and people who are working to do this kind of leaderboards, to see what's the productivity, because Perl 6 is mostly volunteer. Yep. So you have to keep the volunteer, engaged and things like that. So I mean, all this kind of analysis, I think it really helps. But
That's right.
yeah, thank you, Soja. Anyways, the charts have been done in R because I don't think there is some module in Perl 6 for doing charts. I don't think so.
We should write this.
You should write that. Or maybe some interface to R because R is wonderful. Okay. Thank you very much.